Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laser Focus. This is the deep dive pop culture podcast from Nerdist. I'm Kyle Anderson. Thank you for listening. Folks, we had as I'm sure you know, or maybe you didn't even notice, but we were dark last week because I was sick. I got very, very sick very quickly, and then just as quickly, it kind of went away. So I sounded like, I'll go ahead and say it, ass last week. So that's why there was no episode. I don't think you wanted to hear me sniffle and blow my nose a bunch. So thank you for bearing with us as we did that. But that sort of leads to what we're going to actually talk about today, because when I was sick, I did a lot of watching of stuff. And most of the stuff that I watched was very strange. And so the episode today, we're going to talk about weird media and why we love it for some reason. And maybe you don't, but I do, and my guest does as well. Returning to the show, he was last on, I believe it was last year sometime, we talked about the James Bond franchise, and that was right before he was going to show his brand new film at a film festival, and now that film is available to screen for yourself at home on Screambox. The movie is called Delicate Arch, and the filmmaker is a good friend of mine. Welcome back to the show, Matt Warren. Hey, buddy.
Hey, Kyle. Thank you so much for having me on again. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming back on.
It was right before our festival premiere in June, so not quite a year ago, but 3/4 of a year. I hope that's not too soon for a return engagement.
No. As fans of the show will know, Mikey Walsh is on every 3 weeks, so it's completely fine.
Yeah, and I am, and I knew it wasn't, but
Yeah.
I had to perform the ritual of begging for forgiveness.
I understand. Yes. And the tithing that comes along with it.
Exactly.
But yeah, so how, I think a lot of things have changed, obviously, since the last time, I know this because we are friends, but you moved to a different state.
I did.
And that has kind of coincided with your movie going to a bunch more festivals, and now it's available to stream and things like that. How is, kind of balancing moving with your film kind of gaining steam as much as a little indie weird movie can?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like with every major life event, marriage, kids, whatever, there's never like a perfect time to do anything. So,
Right.
yeah, 2024 was a big one for both me and Shannon, my wife. We picked up stakes in California and moved out to Louisville, Kentucky, which we're enjoying quite a bit so far, despite the punishing winter that we just barely survived. And, at the same time, I left a really great job that I had done for about a decade, but kind of had plateaued in a lot of professional ways. And that coincided with this film coming out, it being my first feature, and me sort of testing the waters at being a professional, or at least semi-professional filmmaker. And yeah, just all of these things kind of collided last year, and 2025 is kind of the year of fallout from all of those major milestones. So it's been a little bit crazy. I'm still kind of getting my feet under me and getting my head twisted on straight, but it's been an adventure for sure.
Yeah. And that's as you said, you can never plan for that type of thing. In a perfect world, you'd have done all the film stuff and then moved, or maybe the other way around. But
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But here you are. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about Delicate Arch, a movie I have seen a lot of times at this point.
Well, thank you. And also, I'm sorry.
No, I really enjoy it. I don't need to tell you that. I'm not buttering you up or anything like that. But I
will accept butter, though. So if you feel like buttering me up, I'll leave the door open for that if you want to walk through it.
Sure. Butter okay. Butter acceptable.
Yes.
Well, this amazing movie that you made with lots of care and craftsmanship. You shot it in Utah at the eponymous Delicate Arch, or very near it, out in the Utah desert, which adds a lot of kind of weird eeriness to it as well. But why don't you explain as much as one can the premise for people who haven't seen it yet?
Yeah, and well, this was sort of the impetus for what we're going to talk about a little bit later. But my line that I've been reciting as I've been doing some press for the film is that it's strange because I was somehow able to write this script and get it funded as a feature film production and get it into festivals and onto a streaming platform, all without ever really having a great elevator pitch or log line for the movie. But the best I can describe it is a sort of a postmodern horror film that has a lot of fun playing with its metaphysical aspects and sort of interrogating the reality of the situation that the characters are in. At its most base level, it's about four college friends who are kind of getting out of their college town because of a big environmental disaster that's happening there, and they're sort of evacuating, but taking the opportunity to turn their time out of town into a bit of like a party weekend uh, down at the Arches National Park in southern Utah, which is where the titular delicate arch is located. And as in horror films, uh, as in fine horror film tradition, they take a lot of drugs, drink, there's some sex, and then things start to get weird and ominous, and not necessarily in uh, a Friday the 13th type of way, but in a way that really kind of forces the viewer to interact with the movie and what I hope are some interesting and innovative ways, as interactive as a static feature film can be. That's not like literally a video game or some sort of VR experience, um, but yeah, things get strange. We play with a lot of different horror tropes,
Mm.
and it all ends in what I hope is an affecting place with the characters at the end. So it's a bit of a wild ride, but I think it's a lot of fun too.
I think it definitely is. Uh, it's also it is itself not a found footage movie, but there's a lot of found footage style aesthetics in it.
Yeah.
Um, your main character is a filmmaker, and the four friends are out there not ostensibly to do this, but they end up making a film while they're out there, kind of a short.
Hmm.
And yeah, so there's a lot of you play a lot with the artifice of there's weirdly enough, I think maybe I told you this before, but maybe not. There's a Monty Python sketch that not doesn't do this exact same thing, but
Yeah.
it they always can tell the characters in a Monty Python sketch can tell when they're on film versus in this on video.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so
Yeah.
there's a sketch where they're like just in a room and it's shot in studio, and then one of them leaves the room and then it cuts and then they're suddenly on 16 millimeter film, and
Hmm.
they're like, oh my god, and they like run to the other window and the other doors and stuff like that. They're like, this room is surrounded by film.
Yeah, that was definitely a convention of that old timey British TV where
Yeah,
like anything outdoors, it seems they would shoot on 16 mil and just default to the video for the inside stuff. I remember that on Faulty Towers a lot,
yeah.
where it would suddenly be a completely different aesthetic when they stepped outside. And yeah, we play with a lot of stuff like that, but we don't just do it for aesthetics. We try to make it mean something within the plot of the film as well. Um, we call them different layers of reality that are sort of represented by different film formats, whether it's old VHS or modern day sort of, not film, but cinema, high quality cinema
Hmm.
looking stuff, and people's smartphones with TikTok filters on them, and the way that things are kind of mediated through a smartphone with like AR filters and stuff like that. We have a lot of fun, or at least I did, playing with all that stuff. So, hopefully it adds up to something that's visually interesting and sort of uh, thematically provocative.
Yeah. We're gonna get into just talking about weird media in general, but did you have any kind of like touchstones for the movie in terms of either filmmakers or specific movies or TV shows or anything like that that you wanted to that maybe you weren't like trying to emulate, but were inspirational to you?
Yeah, I think I'll cite two different folks who one ended up being our executive producer on the film, which was very exciting for me because I'm a big
Mm.
fan of this guy. But Rodney Asher, the to call him a documentarian, I guess is accurate, but his documentaries are very not what you would. They're more like video essays slash sort of, I don't know, almost like gonzo journalism.
Yeah, kind of reenactment style as well
Yeah.
sometimes.
So he kind of burst onto the scene with Room 237, which was essentially a feature-length video essay about The Shining and all the weird fan theories about what the different parts of the Shining mean, which I think is a great film and a misunderstood film by a lot of fools and idiots out there. Um, I think I think that's one I hear people talk about very stupidly on the internet sometimes. Um, but that was his sort of first big thing that popped, and then he did an incredible film called The Nightmare, which
Mm.
was all about sleep paralysis and is one of the most terrifying movies you're ever going to watch. And then the movie that I think most directly impacted Delicate Arch was I was going to say his most recent, but he actually just had a new one come out at South by
Oh, really?
a couple weeks ago.
Didn't
But
even know that.
his most recent one before that was a film called A Glitch in the Matrix, which is all about simulation theory and exploring the idea of simulation theory from all different sides and being playful with the idea, but also kind of profound and existential and creepy. Um, and that questioning reality aspect was definitely like a big thing that played into Delicate Arch when I was writing it. So that was a huge influence, and Rodney's films in general were a huge influence. And then there's another guy who is, I would almost describe him as Salt Lake City's equivalent of John Waters, kind of a quirky local filmmaker who makes kind of real culty, obscure stuff. His name is Trent Harris, and he is actually sort of a family friend of ours. I grew up in Utah, and my parents were uh, journalists, and Trent Harris also ran in journalism circles, so that's where they knew him from. But he did a lot of really interesting work. In particular, he did the film Ruben and Ed, which a lot of people don't know this, but when Crispin Glover went on the Tonight or the Letterman show and was had like weird bell bottoms and long hair and was like demonstrating karate kicks and like almost kicked Letterman and got kicked off and stuff.
Yes.
So he was actually in character as his character. I forget whether it was Ruben or Ed, but
It looks
he
like
would
Ruben.
Ruben, yeah. So he was in character as Ruben from Trent's movie Ruben and Ed when he did that in some sort of. I don't even think he was there to promote that film, but it's just a weird factoid. And then the thing Trent did that people may or may not have heard about is a movie called The Beaver Trilogy, and this is all great because these are things I wrote down on my list to talk about as part of weird media and weird movies. But it works for our topic as well as just walking through some of the influences on Delicate Arch. But
Yeah.
so this movie, The Beaver Trilogy, is a triptych. It's basically the same story three times, three short films that basically tell the same story, made years apart and sort of combined into this feature omnibus. But the first one, and they're all about basically a small town drag performer in Beaver, Utah, performing like who meets a TV reporter and invites him down to Beaver, which is one of the most rural parts of Utah, to photograph a talent show that he's putting together, which kind of culminates in him singing this Olivia Newton-John song. And there's a lot of interesting stuff there about gender and small towns, and just being an outsider. And the first of these three films that comprise the Beaver trilogy, the first one is a documentary short, which covers the actual character that Trent meant, who was this Olivia Newton-John impersonator in rural Utah. The second film was a short Trent made at AFI when he was a student there. I think it was his thesis. And it is all shot on black and white VHS video, which is very unique aesthetic. And it stars Sean Penn as that character, like a very young, like pre-Spicoli Sean Penn.
Mm. Oh, wow.
And then the third one is, I think it was a Sundance Labs short. I may be getting that wrong, but sort of a more well-funded, well-produced 35 millimeter short starring Crispin Glover, the aforementioned Crispin Glover, as this same sort of drag performer character. And so it's, you get to see the same story sort of treated three different ways with three very different aesthetics. So that was a huge influence on us as well. And that's also like a quirky Utah movie, just as our film is a quirky Utah movie. So there's a real sense of place in both projects, I feel.
I'm going to have to track down both of these things because I've never even heard of Trent Harris.
Yeah.
But I've definitely heard of Crispin Glover.
Yeah.
And he is was a stone cold weirdo. I don't know if he still is.
I imagine, I doubt he's become like a CPA recently.
Probably not.
Probably not.
Who knows?
So yeah, I mean that was a long-winded answer, but I would say Rodney Asher, Trent Harris, Glitch in the Matrix, Beaver trilogy, those are direct sources of inspiration for Delicate Arch.
That's fascinating, like touchstones for that, because I think once you mentioned Glitch in the Matrix, which I have seen, that makes a lot of sense because that is interviews, as is Rodney Asher style, interviews with people, audio interviews that are presented as different kind of, I don't even know what you want to call it, like, in universe, like in game engine kind of like characters walking around talking and stuff like that. It's really interestingly done. And he presents all of his movies kind of are presented without commentary for the most part. Like he just kind of allows the subjects to say stuff and just, they might contradict each other, but like he doesn't spend any time interrogating it, which I find really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Nightmare was a terror. I don't think I'll ever watch that again because it freaked me out so very much. I've seen Room 237 a bunch of times, but
and someone can fact check me and probably see if I'm wrong or not. But at least in my memory, I had at Sundance one year what I consider the scariest day ever, where the three movies I saw were The Nightmare, It Follows, and The Witch.
Oh my God, what a day.
Like bang, 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 back to back to back at the same Sundance. Hopefully those did all play at the same Sundance, and I'm not just inventing that memory. But in my memory, at least, those were the three movies I saw that day. And hence the scariest day ever.
It's good for this. I'm not even going to look it up. It's good for the story that you watch those all on that same day. It's sort of, when we talk about weird media and weird cinema, there is a kind of inherently, I think a lot of times, weirdness is kind of scary to people, whether it's intended to be a horror movie or not. There is a level of, a couple weeks ago, I don't even know how long ago now, but when Lindsay was on a few weeks ago, we talked about Twin Peaks and how that is straight up weird, but also terrifying at the same time in a lot of ways. And I think that
I loved your like breakdown of Lynch on that episode where, what did you say? It's like Lynch is like a woman screaming in terror, like a clown dancing around, and like an old man laughing, but you don't know why.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like someone doing a weird thing.
Yeah.
Someone laughing and then someone screaming
Yeah.
at the same time, and you're
Uh,
not entirely sure, but like it.
I was like, "Damn, Kyle cracked the code on that motherfucker." Yeah.
It's I mean, honestly, like, that's what it feels like a lot of times to watch a David Lynch thing. Is just like,
Yeah.
I know this is scary, but it's also weird and funny, and it's
Yeah.
also confusing. And that
Well,
David Lynch is like the patron saint of weird movies, I think.
yeah, when I actually, like, when I was putting together my little list of things that we could possibly talk about for this subject, I made myself dig a little bit deeper because you could, of course, like, there are lots of weird movies and people who sort of whose bodies of work traffic in weird media,
Mhm.
like Lynch, of course, and like Cronenberg, Guy Madden, um,
Yeah.
you know,
Werner
John,
Herzog was one that I
J-
thought of as well.
yeah, John Waters. So
Yeah.
I tried to go a little bit more even past those guys and and try to dig up stuff that I had seen that was even sort of stranger and a
Mm.
lot of the time sort of bordering on like outsider art or like, art film, not like art house film, but just like art, video art
Yeah.
that I think can be very strange sometimes.
Let's hit it. Let's get into it.
Yeah. Well, I think what one and it's an art collective, and I think they do so. It's not just one person here, but I think they do music and they do uh, some film and video stuff. Actually, a lot of film and video stuff, and just visual art. But have you ever heard of the collective PFR?
I have not, or not to my knowledge anyway.
Yeah, so it's spelled PFFR for some reason, but pronounced PFR. And I think there are a lot of people involved in this that kind of come in and come out. It is branded as like an artist collective, but two of the main ones are Vernon Chapman, who is like a longtime South Park writer,
Mhm.
and uh, and John Lee, who's directed a lot of stuff on like Broad City and like Search Party and kind of hip New York alternative comedies like that.
Mhm.
And they have made a lot of very interesting and very, very bizarre television shows over the past 20 years. I think the thing that was on when I was in college that kind of captured my imagination was Wonder Chosen.
Yeah.
Did you ever see Wonder Chosen?
I did. Not all of it, but I watched an episode or two
Yeah.
when it was on when I was in college.
Yeah, so that was like that was a show that ran on MTV for 2 seasons that was essentially a parody of a Sesame Street style children's show, but it was very like subversive and perverse and a
Mhm.
lot of just like bleak pitch black comedy, and all of their stuff has a vague sort of progressive like anarchist political bent to it. So that was what captured my attention from them initially, but they've gone on to do all sorts of cool things, like, and a lot of it has been on Adult Swim, which we there's a whole conversation to be had about Adult Swim and all the weird stuff they've done and like
For
how
sure.
they've kind of been great patrons of weird filmmaking over the years. But they did a show called Xavier Renegade Angel, which was all done and sort of just very early computer animation, and it's a really bizarre sort of psychedelic quest narrative. They did that show Delocated, uh,
Oh, sure.
which was super funny. They did a really grotesque sort of uh, like parody of like an Appalachian sitcom called The Heart Holler, which is totally weird. And the the most recent thing they've done for Adult Swim was that show The Shivering Truth. Did you ever see that?
That one I don't know. The Shivering Truth.
Well, for anyone who loves So if you like Charlie Kaufman type stuff that's very like bleak and existential, but has like a dark sense of humor, it's all done in sort of Rankin and Bass style claymation, but it's just every episode is just these interwoven series of vignettes and like tragicomic short stories that really kind of get into the nature of existence and humanity from like a very pessimistic view. But it's fascinating stuff because there's a lot of like philosophy and and a lot of just really really odd thought experiments that make that show. So I definitely recommend The Shivering Truth to people who I think like weird stuff, because that's a good one.
That kind of interestingly enough parallels one thing that I was going to mention, but I'm so late to the party on this, but because I just watched it not this last weekend, but the weekend before. Doesn't matter. Whenever you listen, when I was ill, I was like
Hmm.
constantly looking for weird stuff and weird, disturbing things to watch for some reason. That's where my head was at. My wife was out of town, so I was just like, I'm going to go real weird. Um, but I finally watched Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. Have you ever seen that? Do you know what that is?
No, I haven't.
It's a British thing. It's kind of a similar thing. It started out as a series of YouTube shorts,
Hmm.
um, which is similar to Wonder Shows and is like a dark existential kind of version of a kids show. So there are puppets. There are three characters who all live in this house. One of them is a duck. One of them is literally their names are Yellow Guy, Red Guy, and Duck. That's the name of the characters. And there's in each, so the red guy is a full size human wearing basically like a red mop on his head with like little googly eyes on top. He kind of looks like a cheap version of oh, what's his name from the Looney Tunes? Gossamer, you know,
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
or the big Muppet like troll character whose name I don't remember.
Yeah,
Um,
is it like Sweetness or
yeah,
something?
Sweetums.
Sweetums, yeah.
So it's kind of like that, but like made on the cheap.
Sure.
And then, but in each one, a different thing in their house comes alive to like teach them a lesson. But very quickly, you start to learn that like the lessons are uh, weird and commercialized and stuff like that, and they're kind
Hmm.
of not good lessons and everything like that. And so there were 6 YouTube shorts, which altogether is like a half an hour. And
Hmm.
then in 2022, they had a 6 episode full sitcom essentially on Britain's Channel 4, which is really funny as
Hmm.
well as being really dark. And it basically, as the series goes along, like you know, uh, the kind of through line is that they are kind of stuck in this house and they don't know how to get out and things like that. And there's
Yeah.
an episode called Dead where the duck reads in the newspaper that he's dead. He's like, "Oh, see, I'm dead," and so then they have to go bury him, and like the casket comes alive and starts talking to him about needing to get buried and stuff like that. It's a very strange show that ends. I won't give it away, but it's sort of like layers of reality type situation.
Oh, well,
Um,
that sounds right up my alley, of course.
Absolutely. I'll
Yeah.
send. You can watch. Like I said, the YouTube shorts, which you should watch first, are 30 minutes all told, and then the uh 6 episodes of the BB or the Channel 4 series are like, I think it's like 3 hours altogether or something like that. So
Yeah.
it was a day for me to watch that whole thing.
And how'd you feel afterwards?
Felt great because it's so creative and like the visuals are so interesting, and and the comedy especially in the Channel 4 season, like weirdly enough, Megan Gans, you know who Megan Gans is?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
She's a TV writer, an American
Hmm.
TV writer, but she was the
Yeah.
story editor on the sitcom, and then like
Oh,
several
wow.
British and Australian
That makes
stand-ups
sense.
that I really like
I
are were
remember Gans had like the weirdest, darkest Twitter page back
oh,
when,
for sure.
yeah,
For
Twitter
sure.
feed. Yeah, that's what I remember her from. But okay, yeah, that gives me an absolute sense of the the tone of the show.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Um it's highly recommended, but it is very in that same vein of just like it starts out as a parody, which is kind of dark, and then like the further you go, like it just gets more and more dark and it gets really bloody, and like
Yeah.
there's there's a through line of like the yellow guy's dad is like this horrible cannibal monster guy, and like it's very interesting. And there's a lot of, and I'd heard about it because there's a lot of like, especially just during the YouTube years, there was a lot of like film theory videos about like what they mean and stuff like that.
Oh,
You
yeah.
don't really need to watch those, but you can watch
No.
just the things themselves. But Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, highly recommended, especially if you like those PFFT things or PFT things. PFR? PFT is Paul F. Tompkins, who I also like, but PFR.
Yeah. Well, actually, before we move off PFR, there was one other project of theirs that is a film, like a feature film, that I wanted to cite as an exceptionally weird piece of media, which is this movie called The Final Flesh. Now, the way this film was produced is totally unique and bizarre. So apparently there are these.
By the way, things can't be totally unique.
Shut up.
Unique means singular. Can't have something more singular than anything else. Anyway, please continue.
All right, I'm putting you on mute on your own podcast.
Okay, thank you. I deserve it.
So I think this is from like the 2000s, maybe early 2010s. But the way it was made was, so Vernon Chapman, one of the main PFR guys, wrote just this bizarre script about, a family dealing with nuclear apocalypse, and made it like all this stuff very darkly comedic and existential and surreal, in sort of the vein of like a Buñuel film like Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie or something like that. So he had this script that was already baseline weird, but then the way he made it was, he apparently at the time, I don't know if this exists anymore, but there were these like independent porn companies that you could hire to make you a video based on your own like unique fetish, like kind of bespoke like grimy porn. And so he sent this script to a bunch of these like, gnarly off-brand porno companies and said like, hey, this is like my fetish, can you just make this movie? And they all did. And they sent the videos back, as they do because they're professionals, and he sort of just intercut all these different these different versions of the script as interpreted by these unrelated indie porno fetish companies. And make no mistake, this is not a pornographic film. It is just like a surrealist dark comedy. And I think there's a little nudity, but there's hardly any nudity and no sex, but it's all sort of like porno aesthetics, kind of run through like the Louis Buñuel sort of European art house filter, and sort of assembled in this weird way with ominous music and everything. And it's a really totally bizarre just experiment that I think is very interesting and very fun to watch.
Man, that sounds really interesting. And like, it's made in 2009, so it's going to have that aesthetic in terms of low budget pornography, which it had video quality always kind of gives you a clue of like, oh, that's what we're working with, huh? This sounds really interesting. Really, really interesting.
Yeah. And you could, I think it's hard to find the actual movie unless it's more available now. When I was trying to find this initially, it was tough to find. I had to find a pirated version of it. But I think the trailer is still out there, and the trailer gives you like a really good sense of what this project is. So,
wow. There's a lot of like still images from on IMDb if you want to look at those. That gives you a sense.
But yeah, I would be remiss if we moved off PFR without talking about Final Flesh.
I'm glad you wanted to talk about that, because that is very bizarre. Okay. Well, I like that. And by like, I mean, think it's going to be weird to watch. Shoot, what was the other one I was going to mention? But that sort of, in terms of like Buñuelian stuff, have you seen the first movie of this person, Quentin Dupieux, that I saw was,
of course,
was Rubber.
Mm-hmm.
But then I also saw gosh, I can't remember the other. I'll look it up. But um, his movies are, indie style, but like Rubber is, nominally about a tire that is alive and has
Yeah.
telekinetic scanners powers that makes people and things explode.
Hmm.
Um, but it's also got a Greek chorus of just people standing out in the desert, like commenting on what's going on,
Hmm.
and also just talking about nothing and stuff. That is a really, really bizarre movie that I remember seeing when came out in 2010. So I would have been living out here already.
What was the one he made right after that? I remember really liking that one as well.
Yeah, that one a long time ago. We used to do Nerdist used to do friggin' I think it was called Wrong, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. I love
Um
Wrong.
we did
Wrong is
like
probably my favorite of his.
yes, I really like that one too. Jack Plotnick, who's the star of that one, and he's also in Rubber, I believe. And I did a live commentary of Wrong.
Oh, wow.
Whenever that was, 2015 maybe,
Oh,
2014.
wow.
Oh shit. He's got a really like weird sense of um Wrong is literally it's about a guy who wakes up to realize he has lost the love of his life, his dog, and he tries to get his dog back, and he runs into a bunch of very strange people, and it's just basically a series of like vignettes, but he meets like absolute nutcases along the way. People like Steve Little is in it. Gary Valentine, people Arden Marine, like a lot of like comedy people, Regan Burns. William Fichtner has a very strange turn in as like a cult leader in it.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
I remember that.
yeah. So anyway, I think that movie is really weird, and I just kind of like that style of surreal movie where it's sort of presented as kind of slice of life, kind of
Hmm.
almost anti-comedy stuff, but it's also like incredibly strange.
Yeah.
Um, and we can definitely get into other filmmakers who have gone on to even greater heights who have kind of had that same style. But I think Quentin Dupieux kind of stayed in the very indie, but he keeps making stuff. Like his most recent movie was of last year called The Second Act, which I did not see, but
Yeah, he churns them out. There are a bunch I haven't seen.
yeah,
But like it's sort of a weird comparison. It's a bit of an A to B, but when I think of Quentin Dupieux stuff and Wrong in particular, I think the like American thing that it reminds me the most of almost is Atlanta, the Donald Glover show.
sure.
And I think Atlanta is like, this is a little bit more, I mean, this is a lot more mainstream than any of the stuff we've talked about so far, but I think people don't realize quite how innovative Atlanta was, just in terms of, it's like a major work of like American surrealism.
Mm.
Um, and I think that the specific innovation that Atlanta brought to TV was, so it felt like all throughout the golden age of TV, um, your prestige shows, they would have their season long or series long narrative arcs, but it felt like for a while there you could count on one episode per season of all of these shows to be like the weird arty one, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
Like all these shows would just drop in like a weird, arty episode, not quite a bottle episode, but kind of like a weird one-off.
Yeah. I think one of the big examples is what's that episode Fly, the Breaking Bad episode?
Yeah, or like Pine Barrens or in The Sopranos.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, where it's sort of like an art movie. It's sort of Buñuel or Louis Malle or something like that.
And then I think that what Atlanta did was just like they threw their hands up and said like fuck it, let's just make every episode one of those episodes.
Yeah.
And then that's our whole show. And that kind of actually echoes just a lot of what hip hop is just cutting out the best part of
Hmm.
a song and like looping it and creating something new with it. Um, so I they're incredibly weird episodes of Atlanta, like the sort of uh, it was like a Michael. I forget the name of the character. It's a great character name, but like the sort of weird Michael Jackson
Oh
episode.
yeah, it's Buddy something, isn't it?
Yeah,
I
something
can't
like
remember.
that.
I'll look it up.
I think that's like the most famous
Yeah,
episode
well,
like
because
that. But they
Donald
definitely
Glover
had.
went to an awards show as him,
Well, that's the thing. Like, I
or
think you could find pictures from that award show of Donald Glover being photographed with that character. So I don't think anyone quite knows who played that character at the awards show
interesting.
because it wasn't Donald Glover. So, but it was definitely like a weird Bob Zamuda,
Yes,
um,
very much so.
Charlie Kaufman, or not Charlie Kaufman, Charlie. Uh, my brain's not working today, but you know what I'm talking about.
The Chocolate Factory. Teddy Perkins.
Teddy Perkins. Yeah.
Yeah, the
Well,
episode
yeah.
is called Teddy Perkins.
Yeah.
Season 2, episode 6.
But that's sort of Quentin Depew adjacent as well as a lot of other things
Yeah.
adjacent.
Yeah. Adjacent Voorhees. Is that anything?
That's a good punk band name.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, that would be a great name. But I think I mean, obviously he's won an Oscar, so it's like this guy is very popular now and very kind of like more mainstream than he used to be. But like Yorgos Lanthimos is just a purveyor of weird movies. Like, you know, the Favorite, which is the one that he, you know, that won all the Oscars, like is maybe his least weird one. But you know, The Lobster is very strange about people who have to in this society have to find a mate, or they will be surgically turned into a different animal, and
yeah,
which is really bizarre. And then Poor Things, which, you know, Emma Stone won another Oscar for, is kind of more, it's fanciful enough that it's like it's more kind of fairy tale than it is just a strange weird movie.
Yeah.
But then there was the movie from last year,
Kinds of Kindness,
which is one of the strangest things I've ever seen. 3 very weird shorts kind of piled all together with the same cast for the most part.
Yeah. And I, of course, loved that movie.
Yes.
I liked The Favorite and Poor Things just fine, but to me, that was like a real return to what I loved about early Yorgos Lanthimos.
Yeah. Yeah, I really liked it as well, but like I can understand why people wouldn't, because it's not. I think my wife turned it off. I went and saw it at a screening, but she watched it when it was on streaming, and I think she didn't finish it. But
well, my favorite of his is actually the one that gets talked about the least. Well, other than I think he had some very early Greek ones that aren't as well known, but Killing of a Sacred Deer, I love. That's like one of my favorite movies of that decade.
Which that's one I actually have not seen. That's like I need to remedy that, and I've meant to for a long time. But
well, that's right in line with Kinds of Kindness and The Lobster and the weird side of Lanthimos.
I love it. Yeah, and it also, I mean, it always gets talked about as like a scary movie too, and that's
quite intense. Yeah,
I find that really interesting, and also it's got Barry Keoghan or Keown or however you want to say it.
Yeah, I think it was one of the first things I can remember seeing. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, I think those kind of movies are kind of more in vogue than they used to be. I mean, because honestly, you could even say like Bong Joon-ho does kind of almost like Parasite is close to being like a surrealist kind of satire movie. Obviously, it moves into kind of more horrific stuff later in the, you know, but People Living in the Walls.
Yeah,
that's straight up weird.
Yeah, they call it frogging.
Yeah,
yeah, some froggers. Yeah, so I mean, I think to Culture's great credit, I think certainly if you're talking about, you know, more, you know, quote unquote mainstream art house stuff like A24 and Neon stuff, like a lot of that type of film is way weirder than it's ever been in any previous generation. You know, if you think about the indie films of the 80s, it was a lot of like social realist dramas, and then in the 90s it was a lot of kind of quirky rom-coms and quirky crime films post Tarantino and everything. But I think, you know, any festival you you go to, especially in the short film programs, you're going to see like some really strange stuff. And I always think what kind of separates the wheat from the chaff with that sort of thing is if it's not just the content of the film that is weird, but like the construction of the film as
Mm.
well, like the formalist aspects. Because it's like, we've all seen a lot of terrible, would be transgressive movies, you know, like horror films and weird short films and stuff. But I think and that's what makes Lynch so profound, is the weirdness of his content is echoed in the construction of his films. And they sort of support each other. It's like a mutual feedback loop, that enhances it. So, that's what I really look for, is weirdness in sort of methodology and formalism, in addition to just content. And we're talking about The Final Flesh and the bizarre way that was constructed. That's like a perfect example of that sort of thing.
Yeah. When I go to festivals, like I've been to Fantasia in Montreal quite a few times at this point. And I always, they're a genre festival specifically, but I always try to find the ones that are like the weirdest or have like the most out there concept, because it's like I can see normal movies anywhere. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah, for sure.
not that I dislike watching like just a good horror movie or anything like that, or a good sci-fi movie, but like one that I saw a couple years ago that I really, not surprised to see on IMDb that it has a very low score, but it was called All Jacked Up and Full of Worms, which was literally about people who, as a drug, like snort actual earthworms, and it like messes with their brains and stuff
Hell
like
yeah,
that.
dude.
And
Was
they
this
have,
the RFK Jr. biopic?
yeah, exactly. But it was a like written during lockdown and then shot like right after lockdown, so it was very much like
Mm-hmm.
we have been inside for way too long and we need to kind of like have some sort of way out, and they shot it very on the cheap in Chicago. And it's such a strange movie, but like it eventually gets kind of surreal and puppety. There's
Mm-hmm.
there's a YouTuber I really like, who has a channel called Scaredy Cats, and will often rate movies, especially 80s horror movies, on how many wet puppets they have, because there was a big thing in the 80s about wet puppets. And so
Oh my god, I love
All
it.
Jacked Up and Full of Worms is a very wet puppet movie.
Yeah, like dripping in like KY jelly.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
An articulated Stan Winston thing.
yeah,
Dripping with jelly.
yeah.
I
Gotta
love it.
those wet puppets.
Yeah.
You gotta love them. But that's the kind of stuff that you get from weird film festivals, or like, like
Mm-hmm.
in Screambox and Shudder, like there are weird horror movies on there. If you want like just straight up normal horror movies, like you can get those most places.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
I feel like watching the weird stuff is where, have you ever seen, these are more normal, but the Caveat and Oddity. Oddity is the more like famous one from last year, or 2 years ago, something like that.
No, I don't think I've heard of either of those.
Those are on Shudder. They're great. It's an Irish filmmaker. Caveat is about a guy who kind of doesn't have, he's like missing part of his memory, but he takes a job basically to watch the adult daughter of this guy, his like landlord,
Mm-hmm.
or the adult niece of his landlord. And he doesn't realize until he gets there that the house that he has to go and kind of house it is on an island with no outlet, like unless you have a rowboat, which
Mm-hmm.
the guy takes. And the girl has issues where she can't be in the same room as people and can't have them come into her room at all. And so the guy has to wear a harness the entire time he's there that has a chain, and he can go all over the place, except he can't go into her room basically. And he eventually finds out that like he'd been there before, but he doesn't remember it. And there's like dead people buried in the walls and stuff like that. And it's
Oh,
a
wow.
very, very strange and kind of grimy feeling movie.
Yeah.
And then Oddity is a similar it's the same filmmaker, obviously, but um, it's about a woman who uh, we don't see what exactly happened, but she's murdered in her kind of house while her husband's at work. He works at a mental institution,
Mm-hmm.
and her twin sister, who is blind but is somehow psychic and like collects like cursed objects, comes to the house to find out what happened and brings like like a man-sized wooden homunculus like to try to, and it just sits there at the table like it's, and just weird stuff happens. It's kind of ghosty, it's kind of,
Mm-hmm.
monstery and stuff like that, and it's the same kind of thing with Caveat. They're both really interesting movies. I think Oddity is the more like approachable one, but I
Okay.
really enjoyed both of them, and I think they're both kind of, out there.
Yeah.
And similar, there's a movie called Terrified, which is I believe a Spanish, or maybe it's Argentinian. I believe it's an Argentinian movie, um, directed by Demian Rugna, and it's just about a block, a town, like a neighborhood block that is cursed, and so
Okay.
each house has something strange happening, and the scariest one is this boy gets hit by a bus, and then like a week or 3 days later, after he's been buried, he just is back in the house.
Okay.
He's not
Yeah.
alive. He's just sitting there.
Yeah.
So it's like weird stuff like that, which borders on surrealist. But
Well, I love
they're all
that.
really good.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm looking at what else I had to maybe talk about. Um, also along the lines. Just to throw a couple just weird films out there. Um, I don't really have much to say about them, but have you ever seen Superstar, the Karen Carpenter story, the early Todd Haynes film?
Yeah, I did a long time
Yeah.
ago.
So that is a very strange one. It's sort of a biopic about Karen Carpenter, the musician who died from anorexia related illnesses,
Hmm.
all done with like Barbie dolls. And that's a difficult one to see, or at least was for a long time, because they could not clear the Carpenter's music that was in it.
Hmm.
So, um, and I'm looking, I think a theme is emerging with a lot of my things, and a lot of these do come from like when I was in college and stuff was not like available on the internet widely. So it really was a matter of like going to weird VHS stores and DVD stores and like digging in the archives. We had in Salt Lake City, we had a great one that was attached to the Tower Theater, a VHS and DVD rental place. And, it was one of those great places that organizes things by director,
Mm.
but you could just dig in and find weird bootlegs of like the early David Lynch shorts and before they were properly released on DVD. Um, and so a lot of this stuff that I still remember comes from those sort of like explorations, which I think kind of just add to the overall experience of finding this stuff. But another one like that was Begotten, the Elias marriage movie. So
Hmm.
this is you'll see images from this.
Oh yes, okay, I know what this is. Yes.
Yeah, you'll see images from this pop up on like creepy pasta Reddits and like you know creepy Instagram pages and stuff, and the images are not are often not sourced back to Begotten
Mm.
uh, and Eli's marriage, but that's what they're from. This is a really bizarre movie that it's only like 40 minutes long or something, but it's all very allegorical. It's about like gods and humans and pagans and rituals and all that. And I don't really remember what the linear narrative is, but it's shot in this really stark, like very black metal sort of high contrast black and white.
For
And
sure.
then I think the film was like damaged on purpose and then like rephotographed. So you're kind of getting a Xerox of a Xerox. So it's even more degraded, which just adds to the grimy atmosphere of it. But yeah, they're it's a series of just kind of strange allegorical vignettes that don't make a lot of sense, but they're all like really beautifully and creepily art directed. Um, and yeah, I think if you just Google, if you're listening to this on your computer, if you just Google "begotten," you'll kind of see this main image of this kind of person being disemboweled in this sort of lovely artistic way that you may or may not have seen before.
Yeah, I watched. I think it was probably a video essay about it or something like that.
Okay,
Um,
yeah,
but yeah, it looks really. They mess with the film, or he messed with the film to such a degree that it like looks. It looks cursed, honestly. Like, and that's why
yeah.
so many people use it for creepypasta stuff. Um, but it does have a lot of like I'm looking on here. Um, in addition to like Christian mythology, Celtic mythology, and Slavic paganism, his influences included Antonin Artaud and Friedrich Nietzsche. So that's an interesting kind of pull. And then um, George Franju, Akira Kurosawa, Stan Brakhage, and the captain of Dr. Caligari. So again, really interesting kind of heady and lofty kind of goals for this
Yeah.
this largely. I think it's silent, isn't it? It has no dialogue.
The version I watched had music,
Sure.
but I don't know if that was the actual music the filmmaker had wanted to accompany it or just something someone overlaid on it, but yeah, I don't know. Um,
Um,
and then this filmmaker, for people who don't know, also went on to make Shadow of the Vampire, the sort of
mm,
20 years ago quasi Nosferatu remake before the Eggers one more recently.
yes, that's right. But there again, like about the making of the movie Nosferatu and
Yeah,
explaining that.
fictionalized story of the making of Nosferatu.
Yeah, that suggested that Max Schreck, the actor who played Nosferatu, was in fact an actual vampire that they dug up and made star in this movie.
Yeah, played by Willem Dafoe, and so when I heard he was going to be in the new Nosferatu, I was like, that guy's already done that. Why? been there, done that. But yeah,
I
so some days you're the Van Helsing, and some days you're the Nosferatu, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true. Some days you kill the bar, and sometimes the bar kills you.
Yeah.
Um, I another movie that I wanted to bring up that I saw at a festival a long time ago, AFI Fest, I think 2013. But kind of in the same vein as those Quentin Dupieux movies we were talking about. It's called Congratulations! Exclamation point. Have you ever seen this or heard of it?
No.
Okay, it is a very strange movie about a missing. It doesn't sound like it's going to be weird. It's about a missing boy and the cops who are like obsessed with trying to find out where this boy is. But they decide or realize that he is missing in his house. And so they set up like a stakeout and crime scene stuff just in this house.
Yeah.
And they just refuse to leave the house because he's got to be in here somewhere. And they've like, where could he possibly be at this point? And it's just kind of about the family having to deal with the fact that there's this cop who just won't leave, but also like he might actually be like legit and might
Yeah.
need to find this kid. It's a very weird movie. It's truly bizarre. But then that also reminds me of all of those Adult Swim kind of shorts. Like,
Yes, that was on my list to bring up. Yeah.
yes, let's talk about those because I love those. I think they're so strange and
Yeah. So this was, according to Wikipedia, this is called like the infomercials
yeah.
series, and I think you can watch them as infomercials on Max right now, which is how I rewatched a bunch of them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, for a while there, Adult Swim was just filling their like dead space in the middle of the night with just really off the chain, bizarre short films, which took a variety of forms. Some were like fake infomercials, some were weird talk shows. I think this is where like Joe Pera Talks to You
Mm-hmm.
originated as one of these. And then the most famous one was Too Many Cooks, which I love. It's like one of my
Yeah.
favorite films of the 21st century, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is, and that's like that's definitely a similar sensibility to a lot of the PFR stuff. Um, very very dark and satirical, and just violent. Uh, but people have probably seen Too Many Cooks, but that really sort of deconstructs reality in ways that I also aspired to do with the movie that I made.
Mhm.
I'm also a big fan of unedited footage of a bear. I think that might be
It
my
it's
second favorite
incredible.
one.
It's
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah. It starts
Well,
out as a commercial for like Zyrtec type of like allergy medicine,
yeah.
and then it like quickly. It actually it's presented as a mid-roll ad. Like if you watch it on YouTube, it's
Hmm.
presented as a mid-roll ad that unskippable, and then it just becomes a waking nightmare for the
Yeah.
lady who took the drugs.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that one's good. And then the other one that was by Alan Resnick, who ended up doing a bunch of these. The other one he did that I think is really great is called This House Has People in It. Have you seen that one?
I don't think I've seen that one. No.
It's I think it should be on Max as well. It was made a little bit later, and it's security camera footage of this house during a birthday party, and so it's all just uh, cameras up in the corner, and there's like weird lore and stuff that you can kind of like piece together if you watch enough of
Sure.
it. But
Yeah.
basically what happens is these parents are fighting, and then this teenage daughter like lays down like she's like nonviolent protesting, and then
Hmm.
she basically like starts to sink through the floor, and they don't know how to get her out, and like she eventually goes into the basement and stuff like that, and it's just like it's so strange. And outside the
uh,
window there's just a mysterious pink woman who's just there. It's
hmm.
so strange. But it's one of those like it's so weird that it's creepy, and I kind of love stuff like that. Regular, like, again, I think gothic horror is cozy, whereas like
Yeah.
surrealist horror is what actually scares me.
Yeah. Me too. Very much so. I love it when you're watching a movie and like you don't feel safe watching a
Yeah,
movie.
for sure.
And I feel like my best in theater experiences have been movies where like I truly felt destabilized. And a lot of times like a good twist ending will do that, but
Yeah.
also, stuff like I feel like a lot of Tarantino movies, especially the ones where he messes with history a little bit, like I feel like, okay, we're in like uncharted territory
Yeah.
here. We're in like a weird like fourth act of the film where anything could happen. And
Yeah.
um it's really making me nervous. And again, more stuff I aspired to in my own work.
There's I found footage movies like we mentioned earlier, like, but mainstream found footage movies are they tend to be like really samey. I do think that the Adam Wingard, Simon Barrett, Blair Witch is more interesting than people could give it credit for, but it is
Yeah,
also
I
doing a
really
lot.
like that. I really
Yeah,
like that movie quite a
I did
bit.
too.
Especially the end is very, it gets to a similar sort of destabilizing place. I think
Yeah.
that's a really well done movie that maybe just suffers from the Blair Witch branding.
Yeah, I think that was, if it was just The Woods, which is what it was initially called at, before the
Hmm.
Comic-Con screening, I think it would have done a lot better. But um more and more like kind of, lower budget mockumentary type stuff really gets to me. So like there's the Australian movie Lake Mungo, which might be the scariest thing I've ever seen.
I've heard of that.
Highly recommend it.
Okay.
I think it's streamable for free on, certain Jeff Bezos owned sites.
Okay.
But it's really interesting, and it is like, because it's low budget and Australian, like they're all actors, but you don't recognize them, so they kind of just feel like real people.
Okay.
And it kind of plays with like ghost stories out of like by way of like time displacement and stuff like that. It's a really, I don't want to give too much away because it's
Oh,
really, really
okay.
fascinating and really disturbing. And then there's a lot of really interesting Japanese ones. Like the one that stands out to me the most is called Noroi the Curse, which is another one you can stream,
Hmm.
which is about, it's like found footage of a guy who had been making a documentary about um this particular curse, and there's like an actual like TV host in it playing herself, but a fictionalized version of herself who
Okay.
also happened to have like, you know, experienced this like scary curse and stuff like that. And it's like it's ghosty and it's just like strange, and the performances are all kind of arch and stuff like that. So those are two like they're not found they are found footage, but they're mostly, you know, in the documentary style. Um but because of that stuff, I find them very destabilizing because they're presented as real.
Mm-hmm.
And they're
Mm-hmm.
in Norway does a little bit, but Lake Mungo never like succumbs to the um we're gonna do the scary thing at the end, you know, kind of whatever, you know,
Right.
special
Yeah.
effecty type of ending. It's just disturbing.
Okay. Well, I'm going to move that to the top of the priority list because I have heard great things about that, and it seems right up my alley.
I think you'd really enjoy it.
Yeah, I do have certain weird media blind spots. I'm not. It's impossible to see everything, but
Sure.
I wrote down a little section in my notes here of just blind spots. So I've never really engaged with anything from the Tim and Eric umbrella of
Oh,
products.
I can't. I have, and I don't really like that level of kind of anti-comedy. I just kind of am not into it.
Okay, I love Tim Heidecker when he pops up as an actor and stuff, but I can't say I've seen a few sketches here and there, which have been kind of hit and miss for me, but I haven't really watched much of that.
I liked
Um,
Tom Goes to the Mayor, which was their kind of like weird cutout cartoon show before Tim and Eric. Awesome show, great job.
oh yeah, I remember that. I
That I
forgot that they
enjoyed,
did
but
that. That I did enjoy too. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, yeah. Yeah. Tom Goes to the Mayor. That one was solid. Um, I know Houseu is a huge one for people. I've
Yep.
never seen it.
Oh, it's so strange.
Yeah.
You got to see it. It's crazy.
Okay. I will.
Can I tell
Someday.
you the story behind that?
Please do.
Because I love it. So in Japan, the film industry really started to take a hit. Once everybody started getting televisions, and that kind of happened after the
Yeah.
Tokyo Olympiad. And so TV budgets got higher and higher because people didn't want to. They're like, why would I want to leave? I have a TV at home. Like, why would I want to go to the movies? And so
Mm-hmm.
largely movies ended up just being for Godzilla movies, or like, you know, kids fare was what they would call it, or like art house stuff, because obviously Kurosawa was still making stuff and whatever.
Yeah.
But eventually, once you got into the 70s and early 80s, TV commercial directors started to like commercials are where like the art house stuff was. So the guy who made Houseu, like was a big famous commercial director, which is a thing that is bananas to me to think about.
Yeah.
So he transitioned. His daughter his daughter dictated a dream she had, and he mixed it with dreams that he had, and then made a feature film out of it.
Okay.
And it's basically like Evil Dead meets, I don't even know what, like it's various like haunted house type stuff, but it makes no sense because it's dream logic, but it's just a bunch of girls who go like happily into this house that's haunted or like whatever, and there's like one girl gets her hands bitten off by a piano, and like there's just like the main foyer like floods, and there's like a giant ghost cat, and it's a totally out there movie that I'm surprised you haven't seen, actually, because it seems like something you would have seen.
Seems up my alley. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've never seen that. I've always wanted to, just haven't made it happen. And then the last thing and there are more than this, of course, but the last thing I have on my blind spots section here is Kenneth Anger.
I haven't seen any Kenneth Anger stuff.
Yeah, that's a blind spot I need to fill in, but I haven't seen any Kenneth Anger work. But Kenneth Anger relates back to someone whose work I've seen a lot of, who I think is a great surrealist, a great early cinematic surrealist, and that's Maya Deren. Have you seen much of her stuff?
I haven't seen anything of hers, I don't think, either.
Oh, like Meshes in the Afternoon. They didn't even make you watch in film school?
No, they did not.
Well, you did a great job, as mentioned already, of like breaking down David Lynch's aesthetic. I
Hmm.
think another way to break down David Lynch's aesthetic would be like it's Maya Daren's aesthetic, but
Okay.
from like the 30s and 40s. And she only made short films. She never made a feature film. But they're very, if it's like a linear progression from like early Buñuel, like Unchin Andalou, to Maya Deren to like David Lynch, I think it's like the the perfect progression of that kind of um, aesthetic. But yeah, her stuff is like super creepy in a really beautiful way. And Meshes of the Afternoon is her most famous work, but I'm also partial to another one she did called At Land. And all of these are on YouTube. I don't think
Great.
they have a real good handle on any of them, but At Land is really cool. And, she directs or co-directs a lot of these and is frequently the star of them as well. And she's like a really charismatic kind of screen presence, even though I don't think she ever says anything in any of
Mm,
her movies. But just as an actor, she's like a historical crush, I would say. Historical crush object of the 20th century.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, can't turn that down. These sound awesome. Also, John Cage is in one. Is in Atland,
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know
apparently.
that.
Um, is it that John Cage? Yeah, it is. Weird. Anyway,
It's not Luke Cage.
no, it is demonstrably not Luke Cage.
Okay.
This is not a power man. Um, yeah, that sounds awesome. I'm gonna need to find her stuff, and I'm glad they're all on YouTube. But
Yeah.
because I'm kind of like I watched a lot of Stan Brakhage when I was in school because I went to school in Colorado and he was a Colorado filmmaker, and so there was a lot of like
Oh, okay.
pushing of Stan Brakhage. If you don't know, Stan Brakhage did a lot of like experimental kind of films. There's one called there's one that is literally his wife giving birth in a tub, which you see way more than you think you should.
Wow.
But then there's one called like I could look it up, but it's just like a series of like scratches and stuff, kind of
Mhm.
in
Well,
sequence.
he would like draw on the actual film stock and stuff.
Yeah.
It was like, yeah. I'm not too familiar, but I do know a little bit. Yeah. So that's the thing I was talking about earlier of some of this stuff just veers into like video installation type
Yes.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and he made 380 movies, little shorts, and some of them are like just a few minutes long.
Yeah.
And none of them are. I don't think any of them are like narrative. They're all just kind of vibey.
Mm-hmm.
Golly, he was also a professor at CU Boulder, which is he was Trey Parker and Matt Stone's professor.
Oh, okay. Cool.
But he would basically make movies with the students. Like that was kind of his and little short weird things, or like he would use the equipment from the school to make all these weird shorts. But
Do you think he knows Deion Sanders?
Unfortunately, he might have known Deion Sanders. Stan Brakhage is no longer with us. He died in 2003.
Rest in power, King.
Rest in power, King. So he might have known Deion Sanders, but
okay.
It was before Deion Sanders coached there by a factor of 25 years.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So that's kind of anyway. My whole point in bringing up Stan Brakhage is that like that was sort of my weird short film, and then eventually Guy Madden also, like his kind of weird aesthetic. I watched a whole basically program of Guy Madden shorts, which I found really fascinating.
Oh wow, yeah.
Was it you who told me about this? I ended up watching it, but maybe it was somebody else. But it was somebody inspired by Guy Madden who did like a 30s style like fake history of this Canadian like pioneer or something like that. Probably not if you can't remember.
You're not thinking of the Guy Madden film about Winnipeg?
No,
something.
But it was inspired directly by my Winnipeg.
Oh yeah, I don't think I know about this.
Yeah, it was a pretty recent movie, but I absolutely do not remember it.
Okay,
but I do weirdly when I think about this movie that I didn't actually remember seeing, I think about playing Sniper Elite 5 or 4 rather. I don't know why, but I spent more time thinking about the movie while I was playing Sniper Elite 4 than I did actually watching the movie.
Because they have a similar setting, or
Nope.
what's the connection?
That like right after I watched the movie, I played that game. And so
Oh,
my memory
okay.
of thinking about that movie was playing the game.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. I do that a lot
Interesting.
actually. Like if I will remember what I thought about while doing a particular task, and usually it's playing a video game.
Oh, strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't say I've had that experience, or at least not in a way that I recognize from you describing it. But we all have our own weird mnemonic things.
Yeah.
For some reason, I always connect like sad things that have happened in my life to whatever was on the TV or whatever
Sure.
movie I'd most recently seen. I don't think that's unique to me, but it's like I always remember Little Big League was on the TV on the in the hospital last time I saw my grandpa or whatever.
Oh
It's like
wow.
it's like fucking Little Big League killed my grandpa, dude.
Is that was the Minnesota Twins one, right?
I think it was, yeah.
Little Big League? I think that's right. It's
Yeah.
where the kid for some reason ends up being the owner of the Twins. What a strange.
There were a lot of dumb kid baseball movies in the
Sure
90s.
were. Rookie of the Year doesn't make
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
A third one probably. Oh, the kid in King Arthur's Court, which is the same kid from Little Big League.
Angels in the Outfield.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which I've never seen the original because that's a remake of an old 40s movie, I think, or maybe 50s.
It is. I started watching it one day and I was like, I can't. This is too boring.
It looks boring.
I must stop.
If I don't have Christopher Lloyd here, I'm
Yeah.
not interested.
I need prominent Disney branding or else I'm not engaged.
Yeah. Says the guy. I'm literally as I sit in my office, there's Disney is out my shoulder. The Disney Studios.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you can see the green ABC building and
Yep.
the Disney lot where I used to work way back in the day. Yeah, man.
Way back, Burbank.
You're in the shit.
Yeah, I am. I'm right in the middle of it. Warner Brothers is over there. It's all right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have any other things you wanted to bring up?
Just I just have a couple things in my notes I'll just hit real quick.
Sure.
I'm sort of loath to mention this guy because I think he's sort of a dirtbag and a creep, but like the work of Harmony Korine.
Sure.
And you know, a lot of weird movies, a couple not so weird movies that are also kind of weird. I saw his movie Aggro Drift, is like one that he shot with like all infrared cameras down in Miami. He did like a tour. I didn't see it at one of these, but he did like a theatrical tour of like strip clubs with it, which makes a lot of sense. But that's a weird one, as are all of his other ones. I want to shout out The Kingdom, the Lars von Trier show.
Sure, which I've always wanted to watch and never have.
Yeah, I think if you've watched all of Twin Peaks and you're hankering for something that's different, but that'll kind of give you the same mouthfeel, I would say go straight to The Kingdom, which they same as Twin Peaks. They did a couple seasons in the 90s, and then 25 years later, they did a new season. I think all of that's on Mubi. And then, there was a really great animated show on Netflix a few years ago called The Midnight Gospel, which was another thing where the construction of it was kind of weird. It was essentially interview segments from the comedian Duncan Trussell's podcast.
Okay.
And sort of the parts of his conversations from his podcast where he would get deep in the woods about like Buddhism and like existentialism and philosophy. So he took like a bunch of that material and gave it to Pendleton Ward to sort of create animations around. And there's a little bit of like a loose narrative thread that kind of runs through all the episodes. But if you want like surreal, whimsical animation and like kind of stonery conversations about, life and death and everything, that's a really cool show. And then Yeah, it just depends how wide or tight you want to expand the aperture of this, because you could talk about what people consider weird media all day, but that was the stuff that came
Yeah.
to mind when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about here.
I went online like I'm a million years old. I opened a new tab and typed in just weirdest movies or weird movies or whatever, and I found this BuzzFeed feed list of weird movies to watch, and I'm going to read them all because some of them are legitimately weird, and they're ones we've talked about, and some of them are ones where you're like, why do you think this is weird?
Yeah.
This is a very strange list. It was a list. I won't shout out the person who wrote it, but it's from a few November 2023, so 2 years ago, or a year and a bit ago. All right, ready? I'm just going to list these off quickly, and you tell me yay or nay if you agree with its weirdness.
Okay, just if I agree if it's weird or not if I like it or not.
You can say both, but the weird is the more important part.
Okay.
The Lighthouse.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's weird.
It's not like the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
No.
Yeah.
Everything Everywhere All at Once.
I mean, if you read comic books, it's not that weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to Bother You.
Legitimately weird, I think.
I would say it's legitimately weird. Swiss Army Man.
It's a little weird.
It's a little weird. Rubber, the aforementioned Rubber.
Yeah, of course.
It's very good. Akira.
Never seen it.
It's great. It's one of the best animated movies, sci-fi movies, anything. It's gorgeous. It is weird in as much as but anime is often weird. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not even the weirdest anime I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's very good, but I wouldn't call it weird.
Sure.
It is a movie I think that everyone should watch yearly for religious purposes. But I don't think it's necessarily weird.
So it's imbued with divinity, but not necessarily in a weird way.
Yeah. This is a movie I legitimately hate. Darren Aronofsky's Mother.
Oh, I love that movie.
That's this was one of those movies where, as I'm watching the movie, I go, "Oh, this is what he's doing," and I was mad at him once I figured out what the whole point or the premise was. I was just like, "Ugh, this freaking guy."
That's good. Kyle's wrong, everybody.
Okay, well, there you go. Midsommar.
It's not weird.
Not weird. Requiem for a Dream.
Not weird.
Upsetting, certainly, but I wouldn't call it weird. You ready for this one?
Sure.
Rise of Skywalker.
I mean, that's also a movie I like that no one else likes. But yeah, I mean, it's not weird. They already made like 10 other Star Wars movies by then.
Yeah. It's also just like a not very good Star Wars movie is not in and of itself weird. It's not like a strange, surrealist masterpiece or anything like that. Or even a surrealist mess. Anyway.
I mean, Babu Frick is I think Babu Frick could be the next Louis Buñuel.
Sure. Donnie Darko.
Nah, I mean, it's like Weird 101.
Sure. Annihilation, a movie I love, but it's about weird things. I don't think in and of itself it's weird. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just too used to it.
It's a more digestible version of Stalker, basically.
True.
Yeah.
And Color Out of Space. It's like both of those put together.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm Thinking of Ending Things, the Charlie Kaufman movie, I think is on the way to weirdness.
Yeah, that's weird. I'll give that weird.
The Menu.
No, come on.
Not weird. Eraserhead. Weird. Good choice here. Okay, this one annoys me. Tenet. Tenet is not. Well, you and I saw this together. This was the first movie I think both of us saw in theaters after the pandemic. I don't know if it was definitely the one that I saw first after the pandemic. But
yes, we saw it at the New Beverly, and we missed watching. We chose it over watching the Clippers go to the finals.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, unfortunately, but we missed the peak of the Clippers.
Yeah, that was they never got better after that. I mean, they're good this year, but
yeah. So we did miss that in favor of Tenet, but I remember we both had a blast at the Bev. It was great.
And this was
Um,
after a ton of people said like, "Oh, it's impossible to understand." I think I understood it fine, but
I understood it enough.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
I think enough is probably the way to go.
I don't think any Christopher Nolan stuff is weird.
Yeah,
It's too mathematical to be weird.
yeah. It does. It's not like existential. Like it's yeah. Tenet is like if you just kind of follow it to the end, it loops back on itself, so it
Yeah,
starts
I
to make
mean,
sense.
Christopher Nolan movies are like graph paper, and graph paper is not weird.
No, that's true. Parasite, as I mentioned, it's on the verge of weirdness.
I don't consider that weird,
No,
but
I don't. I don't really either. But
I mean, it's great. But
here's I don't know if you've seen this, but the End of Evangelion movie from 1997.
is this another anime thing?
It is.
Then no.
Okay. But it's only, I mean, it is itself weird, but it's also weird when compared to the series Neon Genesis Evangelion. So the End of Evangelion is basically a different alternate version of the end of that series. They're
Oh,
both weird in different ways, but the movie is much more like viscerally, violently weird, whereas the TV show ends in a very like surrealist kind of like minimalist space. But
okay.
anyway, The Lobster we said was pretty weird. This is another one that I think is kind of like Weird 101, being John Malkovich. Like,
Yeah, that's weird 101.
yeah. And then the last one on this list is Kevin Smith's Tusk, which I think if you think that, I mean,
No, please.
it's bad. Sorry to anyone who loves Tusk, but it's not a good movie.
No, come on.
All right. So that's what people think that's why I was like, oh no, like how are we going to be so esoteric? I think we're more esoteric than most people, but
Oh yeah, there's always someone who is going to be more versed in weird shit than we are. But
yeah.
compared to the vast majority of the population,
Yeah.
I think we know from weird.
We know from weird. And speaking of weird, your movie Delicate Arch, why don't you tell people, plug it, tell people how to watch it.
Well, thank you, sir. I will avail myself of the opportunity. Delicate Arch. It's good. It's 85 minutes. You're in, you're out. Hopefully, your whole life is destabilized and ruined by it.
That's the goal of every good movie.
Yeah. It is streaming on Screambox. So sign up for Screambox if you don't already have it. You can just get the free trial. I hope no one from Cineverse is listening. But streaming on Screambox, and then you can buy it or rent it from all of the usual suspects: the Tim Cook website, the Jeff Bezos website, the I don't know, whoever owns Xbox, whoever owns
Xbox is Microsoft, so whoever the Microsoft person is now, Bill Gates sold it, I believe.
Yeah, but yeah, anywhere you can find movies to rent or buy, it's there as well. But if you want to stream it for quote unquote free, streaming is not free, people, but it is on Screambox. It's probably the best place to find it.
Yeah, it's worth watching. Like I said, I've seen it a few times. Yes, you are my friend, but I would tell you if I didn't like it, probably, because
I don't know if you would, but
I don't know if I would.
I also believe that you legitimately like it. So
yeah. So please watch Delicate Arch. Matt, thank you so much for joining me to talk about weird movies.
Yeah, it's been a blast.
Do you want to plug any social medias, or are you off that shit?
I still use Instagram. It's pretty much the only thing I'm on these days. So you can follow me personally at MPM Warren. And you can follow our movie at Delicate Arch Pick. And those are, I mean, if you follow one, you're basically one or the other. You're basically following both, because I cross post a lot of stuff.
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram if you wish, functional_nerd. You can also follow me on Letterboxd, Kyle_Anderson. You can see all the weird stuff I watched while I was sick, of which there were a lot of Spanish horror movies, a lot of Japanese horror movies. These are things I like to watch. And I rewatched Ichi the Killer, which I hadn't seen since I was in college, and I don't think I ever need to watch it again. I'm
oh, wow.
But anyway, all right. Thanks again, Matt. Thank you so much for listening to Laser Focus. I'm Kyle Anderson. Join me again next week when my guest will be a different person. Bye-bye. Laser Focus is a production of Nerdist Industries and Legendary Digital Networks. It was produced, edited, and hosted by me, Kyle Anderson. For more, visit Nerdist.com.